Hey, how's it going, folks? This is Hellbent, and in this video I am going to be releasing the second custom control in a set of controls. Yesterday I had released a custom button. This time I'm going to be releasing the custom switch, basically a checkbox. Everything that you need will be in a link in the description. So in the description I'm going to, once I'm finished with this video, I'm going to take what I have, whatever I type out in this video, I'm going to paste this to pastebin.com, and you can go there, copy the text, put it into a script, and then away you go. You have everything you need to start using these custom switches in your scripts. Before we begin, I will point out that this is part of a set, and this set is designed for a darker themed GUI. So if you want like a white GUI, I'm not really sure how well these are going to fit on that. I don't know, maybe it'll look okay, but the color that I found is about in the darker gray color. But anyways, let's go through how to use this. So this is part of a set of controls. I have 4 controls so far in this set that I created using my bitmap maker. And let me get to the control that we're going to today. A rounded switch. So these are all created using GDIP. So if you don't have GDIP, I'm going to include at the very bottom a copy of GDIP so that you'll be able to use these no problem. But these are the switches. If you're interested in creating your own controls, I'll give you a quick little demonstration of how it basically works. So this is just an environment that allows me to draw like you normally would, where you can see things visually rather than having everything as code, which you would normally have with GDIP. So it would be create a brush, which is a line of code, and then draw something, which is a line of code, and then delete the brush, which is a line of code. Instead of having that, this environment allows me to draw in real time. This, I think I'm going to go with this one right here first. If I look at it, all it is just a bunch of shapes that are drawn on top of each other, and if I go through it and start hiding the element, you can see how these controls are constructed. When I'm done, I export it, and it gives me the code that I would normally use in a script to do the exact same thing. So I start with just a bitmap of a certain size. In this case, it's 29 pixels by 21 pixels. And then I add a background to it. I add the first layer to it, which is just an outline. Then the next layer gets added, which is just a little bit above it, and etc. And the next layer, etc., etc., etc. And when I'm done, I have a control. So this is the on switch and this is the off switch, and that's how they're created. And this is, then I take this, take the code, convert it so that way it can be used in a class, and then that's the class that I've written that I'm sharing today. So to run this, like I said, it's going to be using GDIP. So the first thing I need to do is start GDIP. I'm going to include the actual library in this script, but if you know how to have it in your AutoHotkey library folder, you can just use include and then include your GDIP library. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. Just follow along with do exactly what I'm doing, and it doesn't even matter. So let me go ahead and grab the library first. So here I have a reduced GDIP library. I've taken out all the functions that I don't need to do most drawing things. Like I can pretty much draw any shape, any color, blah blah blah, add any brush I need. I've removed most of the other functions that I don't need just to reduce the amount of code. So at the very bottom of my script, since I never actually need to access this, I can put this way down at the bottom. It's out of the way. I never need to deal with it. Alright, so I have the GDIP library in my script. The next thing I need to do is start GDIP before I start actually drawing things. So up at the top of my script, I'm just going to run the function GDIP. Is it startup or setup? I think it's startup. I'll check in a second just to be sure. So I'm going to call up this function GDIP startup, which allows me to start using GDIP library to start drawing things. Let me go over what I have in the script besides this. So if I ignore the fact that I just typed something there, all I have is I set up a script to be single instance. And I've created a little window that's set to always on top. I've set the background color to be 33333, which is like a darkish gray color, not quite black, not quite white. And I've shown a little window that's 400 pixels by 250 pixels, and I've given it a name that's going to show up in the title bar, Switch Demo. I've added in my return, I've added in the GUI close label, the GUI context menu, and a hotkey escape, and if I do either of those, it'll just exit out of the script. So let's have a look at what we have. So here's my little window. Like I said, this is about the color of that works really well with this control. You can go a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, but other than that, I don't know, you just play around with it, see what you like. Next thing I need to include the class. So once again, you can have this class in your library folder and just put at the top of your script include, and then have it included that way. If you don't know what I mean, don't worry about it, just do exactly what I'm going to be doing in your own script. Just paste it in near the bottom. We'll go over a little bit of the things about the class in a little bit. For now, let's just keep moving on. So I have the class, I have the GDIP library set up, I have a little window. Now I can start adding in the controls. Unlike the button class, there is no other functions that I need to include. Like there's no hover function, I don't need to set up any timers or anything like that. This is just click and it activates everything like that. So the next thing I need is a instance of creating a new instance of this class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, because this has all the arguments that I need to pass. And I am going to say that here I can use any variable that I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is demonstrate that you can attach. Normally with checkboxes, you won't normally have to attach the checkbox itself to its own label. Usually you can wait and have like a button execute the thing, and then these are the options that would be executed in your program. So, but sometimes you might have a case where you do actually need to attach it to a label. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable. I'm just going to call it always, because this one I'm going to attach to a label. So what I want is I want to have a little switch that if I toggle it, it'll change this GUI from being always on top to not always on top. So I can, while the program's running, I can switch between it. So sometimes I might want it to stay up on top, sometimes I might not. So I'm going to use a switch to do that. So I'm going to say always : equals a new instance of this class. So I need the class name. Not a very clever name, it's just flat round switch type 1. So I'm going to say it's a new, always equals a new instance of that class. And then I'm going to pass it its arguments. So I have an X value, a Y value, a width. The height is predetermined, it's always going to be 21 pixels. Unlike the button, you can't adjust the height of this. In fact, you can't change the size of the control at all. All you can do is adjust the width, but that just has to do with the text, which is a feature that I added after I'd already created the class. So I added in a width so that way you can, before when I first created this, you couldn't type in text, you'd actually have to create a control underneath and have it sit beside it. I've changed that to make it so that way you can actually type in text through here. Alright, so I need an X position, so I'm going to set it to be X equals 10. So I'm going to have it 10 pixels from the edge of my interface. I'll do Y at 10 as well. The width, I might have to play around with it a few times depending on how much text I add. The minimum width for the control is it 19? I think I'm not. Let me see. Let me see. I'd have to pull up that control again to see what the actual width would have, the minimum width would have to be. But I'm going to start off with something like 50 pixels. Like I said, I'm going to have to play around with this depending on how much text I add. So I'm going to add some text that says always on top. I'm going to leave the font to be Arial. Because this is using the GDIP library, in the normal GUI, when you set a font, if you're sharing your script with somebody, if they don't have the font that you select, it'll default to Arial. With the GDIP, you can make it to do that, where it'll default to a specific font if the person doesn't have it, but I don't have it set up that way. So make sure that, one, your best option is to try to pick a font that most people are going to have, or two, make sure that you let the people that you're sharing it with know that it has a specific font, and that if they don't have that font, they're going to have to download it. Downloading a font is really easy. You just do a Google search for that font, you download it, and then once you have it, you can run any program that's using that font. Once again, you can also have up here, say blah blah blah, download that font, whatever. Okay, some options. Font size. I can do the point size of my font and any other options like bold, underline, strike through, etc., etc. So I'm just going to leave it as this. Font size of 10, and I'm going to make it bold. The font color. Normally with GDIP, you have to specify that it needs to be a hexadecimal number, so you'd start off with the 0x to specify that it's a hexadecimal number, and then you specify the alpha that you want, and then you specify the color that you want. I've shortcutted it so that way you only have to add in the color. So I've gotten rid of, you don't have to type out 0xFF. It does that for you. Next is the window that you're going to be attaching. So you might have multiple different windows. Specify which GUI that you're going to be attaching it to. The GUI that you're attaching it to has to do with this right here. So if I wasn't naming this GUI 1, perhaps I was naming it settings. If I would change everything, to settings, and then over here, instead of attaching it to GUI 1, I would set it to GUI settings. Okay, I think that's pretty clear. So let me undo. Okay. The background color is an important thing because around the control there's actually an area that you can't see. It's meant to blend in with the background, and this just has to do with the anti-aliasing. Don't worry if you don't understand what I mean. But what you want to do is you want to, whatever color you set your GUI background color to be, that is the color you're going to set this to be. So in my case, I set it to 333333, which is a darkish gray color. Next is the state that I want to use. Like, do I want the switch to be on or off to begin with? So if I want it to be on, I set it to a value of 1. If I want it to start with it being off, I set it as a value of 0. I'm going to have it set as a value of 1 to start with, because I'm using this as always on top. This is going to control the option always on top, so I'm going to have it set to be on to begin with. The last thing is you can actually get rid of this for most of the time. Let me copy that. Most of the time when you create a new switch, you don't need to add that last thing, because most of the time with the switch you're not actually going to be attaching it to a label. Usually it's through the execution of pressing a button or something that it'll check the value, etc., etc. But in this case, because I'm using always on top, every single time I click on that switch I want it to update. So in this case I am going to attach a label, and I'm going to attach it to a label called always on top. I'm going to copy this and create that label down here. And for now, I'm just going to, for testing purposes until we get going, I'm just going to have it play a sound beep. And that's all it's going to do for the moment. I think I have everything ready. So let me see. Always equals a new flat rounded switch. The X position 10, Y, da da da, da da da, Arial, font size, font color, window, background color, state, always on top. Okay, I think I have everything that I need. So there we go. So I can see, like I said, the width has to do with the text. So what I can obviously see that the text isn't fitting in. So I'm just going to play around with this until I get something the size that I want. So I'm just going to jump to 100 pixels. And I can see I still don't have enough room. So I'm going to jump it up to 120 pixels. And there we go. I have it fitting. Maybe I don't like this size. Maybe I want the text to be a little bit bigger. So I'll jump it up to 12. I'll probably have to adjust the width again. Nope, it fits in, so I'm happy. So there we go. I have a switch. Yeah, and it should be working right away. So right now, if I click on it, all it should do is jump into here and play a sound beep. And I don't know if you can hear it over the computer, but it is playing a sound beep. So that's not what I want it to do. And actually what I do want it to do is I want it to switch between always on top and not always on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if this always is now going to be part of an object. So I'm going to reference that object. So I'm going to say always. And then the key that I want to look at is the state. So always dot state. If it equals 1, then I'm going to GUI 1 plus always on top. Else, so if the switch is turned off, GUI 1 minus always on top. And there we go. Now I should, as you can see right now, no matter what, it stays always on top. But if I run it again, because I've added in that new code, it stays on top. Turn it off, and now it gets buried. Stays on top. Okay, so that's how you use it. Let's go into a couple more quick examples of use. So besides doing it this way, what I can also do is, the more common thing that you would do is have things executed. So you press a button or something and then you execute your script, and it takes those options that you've been selecting and it checks those values and does appropriate things for it. So let's set up a scenario like that. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, let's say, 3 switches, and I'm going to put them all into an array. So I'm going to create an array, and I'm going to call it options. Options. I don't know. Options. I'll do. I'm going to create an array called sound options, and I'm going to say sound options 1 is equal to a new switch. And I'm just to make this a little bit quicker, I'm just going to duplicate this line a couple of times, and then I'm going to go through and adjust all the options for them. So I'm going to duplicate and change this to be the second one. This is going to be the third one, and then I'm going to go through. So I'm going to leave them all as X10, but with the Y, what I'm going to do is, because I already have a value for Y, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Y and I'm going to say that it's plus equal about 30 pixels. I'm going to drop it down about 30 pixels because I already know that the height of this control is 21 pixels. So if I go down 30, it'll have a little bit of a space between the controls of about 10 pixels. I'm going to leave it about 120 pixels for now, and I'm just going to put in some new text. I'm going to say that this is option 1. Option 2, option 3. I'll leave the font the same, size the same. Maybe I'll change the color just to give a little bit of variety here. So I'll do this red. I'll do this green. And I'll do this aqua. Because I'm not sure how dark blue would show up. So I'll do it aqua. They're all going to be on window 1. The background color is going to be the same. I'm going to have the first one set to a value of 1, the second one set to a value of 0, and the last one set to a value of 1. Why not? Because in this case, I'm not going to be using it where when I press on the switch, I want it to execute code right away, so I can get rid of this label from all of them. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a button that it's when I press the button that it'll execute the code. So I got rid of the label, and there we go. Alright, so I have those added. If I run it, oops, I forgot, this is actually supposed to be the same. Y plus 30, Y plus 30. Alright, there we go. So I have a couple of new switches. Alright, so let's go ahead and code for them to actually work now. So to do that, I'm going to add in a button. I would really be using my custom button, but the video isn't about that, so I'm just going to use a default button. And a plain, ugly default button. X, let me put it at the edge. So I'll do X 290, Y 210, width 100, height 30. I'm going to attach this to a label called, I'll just call it test. And I'll put some text on the button that says do something. I'll take this test label and create it. And here is where I'm going to actually start testing my states. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set up a, if you don't know, it'll be very helpful if you already know how to use a normal checkbox, because the principle is basically the same. It's virtually identical to using a normal checkbox. You associate a variable with a checkbox, and then when you, let's say, press a button, you check the values of those checkboxes and see which ones have a 1 or which ones have a 0. This is exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through all of them. I'm going to say if the sound options 1 dot state, because that's how I access whether it has a 1 or a 0, is I check its state. If it equals 1, then I'm going to sound beep. I'll do 400 hertz. I'm not going to have an else. I'll just leave it. If it's 0, then it does nothing. But I could set up an else to do something else. But I'm just going, like I said, it's helpful if you already know how to use a checkbox. I'm going to say if sound option 2 has a state of that, I'm going to sound beep, and I'll do 500 hertz, and I'll do one more for the last one. So this is going to be the third one. If it has a state of that, I'll have it loop 3 times and sound beep 700 hertz. And then regardless of whether any of those are true or not, I'm just going to have it pop up a tray tip. and say, I think I need that. Done. And there we go. So I'm using these, whatever my states are for whatever I switch, whether I switch the switch on or off, I can test it in my, when I press my button, and it'll do the appropriate action. So right now, if I turn them all off and then press the button, all I should get is a little tray tip that says done. And there we go. I'm going to turn on the first switch and I should get a sound beep of 400 Hertz. If I do the second one, it gives me 500 Hertz. And the last one gives me three beeps of 700 Hertz. If I turn on the first one, and that's it. So that's how you use it. I know it might seem a little bit complicated because of all this stuff down here, but don't worry. All you have to do is, once that's pasted in, you never have to deal with it. This is where the business is, right here. It's one line of code, and which is the exact same for a normal checkbox. Let's go ahead and actually add in a normal checkbox so we can get a little bit of contrast of what that looks like in comparison. Maybe you like a normal checkbox. I like a little bit of variety, so that's the purpose of these things. Uh, 35. And with that, I have to change the font. Alright, so a little bit of contrast between these switches and a normal checkbox. Right, so there's not, I know this is a little bit longer, but ultimately it's not that much different than just having a line of code for a normal checkbox, because in here I'd still have to add in the label, I'd still have to add in all the other things, options for it, etc., etc. So really it's not much of a difference between the two of them in terms of code. I'd still have to do the same thing for this as this to actually test my variables. In fact, I still have to update. Any associated variable with my checkbox, I'd have to update its value, submit its value, which I don't have to do with these ones because they do that on their own. Alright, so that's that. Let's go into how you can actually customize these to make them a little bit more suitable for what you want. So these ones I have designed for a specific project that I was working on. If I come over here, they're themed with a very specific color theme, which is this purplish color. And all of my controls and a bunch of the different text things have that same color to go along with the theme of this window. Maybe you don't want that purple color, so let's go over how you can change that purple color and make it the color that you would want. So if I go down into the class, now what you might want to do is actually expand out the options that are available. So add a couple of extra options into the class. If you don't know how to do that, don't worry about it. Just do what I'm going to end up showing you. But you extend it out, add in some more options, attach it to, make sure it's part, you do add it in here, and then in the create bitmaps for the on bitmap, and I've made sure to highlight it with using this line right here to indicate where you can find it. This is where I would change the color of this purple right here. So it has two colors. One is like a little bit of a shadow, and if I can demonstrate that by duplicating that line and changing this a little bit. So I'll change this to red. so that way you can see. Right, so now you can see the red is the top part of the color, which you'd want to make a slightly darker color than the bottom part. And then the second color here is the bottom part. So let's say I want to make this control a red control. What I can do is I'll do let's say 8A for the darker color, and then the second color I'll make FF. So if you're not familiar with working with hexadecimal colors, I do have a script that's available on my channel to help you select colors. So you can find this on my channel, and this allows you to create colors. You can generate random colors within ranges, so you just change the ranges, generate, pick a color, and then you can go from that. So if you're not familiar with working with colors, this tool can be quite helpful. So like I said, I'm gonna do slightly darker red, which is AA. Oh, that's actually up there. AA. So this is going to be the top color, and then the bottom color is going to be that color. And there we go. So maybe I want some red switches. Like I said, your best bet if you're going to be, if your GUI is only going to have one color for all the switches, then this is an easy enough way of doing it. Just go directly into the class, into the bitmap, and directly change the color. If you're going to have multiple different colored switches on your GUI, the better option would be to extend this out so that way you can add in those 2 extra colors. Once you have those added in, you would replace, rather than having the color here, you would have the variable's name here, and the variable's name here for your second color. So if you want red, you do it that way. Maybe you want, instead, maybe you want a yellow color. Have some yellow switches. Maybe you want green. Oops. Maybe you want green switches. Whatever color you want. This is how you manipulate those. I'm going to comment. I'm going to get rid of what I just typed in, so that way when you get your copy, you'll have it exactly the same way that I have it. I want to get rid of this. So I'm going to go back to the purple theme, and there we go. So if you have any questions about that, you can go ahead and ask, but I think this should be pretty clear. I've made sure to highlight where it is, the on background colors. It's in the create on bitmap method. And I think that's it. I hope you enjoy. I hope you make some interesting windows using this. I should have the next control out. I don't know when. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, maybe next month. I don't know when it will be, but the next one I will release will be the radio buttons. So these radio buttons here, I'll release these. But anyways, that's it for this one. Peace. I am out.